Yo, what up, what up, what up, what up, YouTube? Back again with another video. This is the Madden or the Making Madden podcast. It just came out like last week, where they talk about gameplay features, enhancement they've made to Madden 22. So as this podcast rolls along, I know it's a pretty long video. There's going to be sections in it where I'm going to be speaking. I'll just speak in terms of certain things that they address, and I just provide my feedback or my thoughts around it in general. So I'm going to let Clint, he's going to come on here and he's going to take it over and talk his piece. And when he's done, you're probably going to hear me follow. I'll put some timestamps in there so you guys can follow along. All right.
So, Clint, I know next-gen player movement was a big piece of the focus this year. So what did you see in the playtest? What do you think about how it was used and the feedback we got?
Yeah, so first, I want to start by saying thank you to all the players who participated in the playtest. Y'all out there don't know how important it is for us to get real-world feedback for all the stuff we've been building. Bugs aside, like Tom said, it was really early, and we wanted to make sure that we had enough time to react to the feedback, and y'all really supplied us with a lot of great feedback. So to answer your question directly, Tom, relative to player movement, for the second year in a row, now that we're on Generation 5 consoles, it was one of the most voted topics of the playtest. There was almost 500 different votes about next-gen player movement, and it ran the whole spectrum. When I say votes, it wasn't just up votes, it wasn't just down votes, it was both. Ran the whole spectrum of player movement feels too slow, all the way to player movement is really authentic, I love it, don't change it. And so it's quite polarizing, and we really expected that because there's a lot of players that are experiencing Gen 5 for the first time this year. And one thing that we wanted to make sure to tell our players is that while there's a lot of feedback in there that's super valuable that we tuned, like separating faster players and slower players, we believe that next-gen player movement, which is built on the back of data, next-gen stats coming from the NFL fields, is what's best for our players and what's best for our game. So there's not going to be a massive pivot in our model of player movement for Madden 23. However, like I said, we are going to continue to tune and take feedback to improve what's there. We know it's a significant change from what everyone's used to on Gen 4, especially on the defensive side of the ball, but we think it provides a more balanced and realistic gameplay experience. And then,
Yeah, just want to talk about next-gen movements. I, for one, I'm in favor of the new next-gen movements because in the PlayStation 4, the way you can just, like I said, we've gotten away from super linebackers. Now we're in super safeties where you could take a safety, a really fast safety, and just roam around the middle of the field from numbers to numbers, 20 yards up, 20 yards down, cover everything, which is unrealistic. And if you watch my stream lately, you see the way I play with my user in the middle of the field. It's like I'm playing to my assignment, and then I got to anticipate either a deep in or a short drag and decide who to follow. You can't follow 6 different people at one time. So I'm for one in just leaving it the way it is and make people play defense the way you're supposed to play defense. So, if you haven't started playing the next gen version, just I suggest you start playing it. One of the things they need to fix for play movements for next gen is route running on the outside wide receivers. They don't run out routes correctly. I just hope that gets corrected. I haven't played the beta, so I wouldn't know. But let's continue here.
and one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we were really clear about with our players is mastering the usage of the acceleration burst mechanic, the right trigger or R2 button on the controller. There was some feedback from the playtest that it felt very sluggish to turn. And that is intentional if you're trying to turn while also trying to accelerate. A lot of players believe that mechanic is speed boost. It's not. Every player has a speed rating that governs their top speed. What it is an acceleration boost. And if you're trying to turn while accelerating, you're going to get a car turn in most cases. If you want a sharp, more efficient turn, you have to let go of that mechanic so you can actually plant your foot and cut. And there's some interplay there, and there's a little bit of skill that players need to get used to. And trust me, we're all the same. When we play, we want to just hold that button down and run as fast as we can all the time. If you're trying to make very efficient cuts behind the line of scrimmage as a running back or cut up the field after a catch, you're going to want to let go of that button to get the most effective, sharp turn that you can.
Yeah, so he just talked about more on player movements and using the R2 to accelerate and slowing down. It seems like for what I'm getting so far, a lot of the move that they're making as Madden moves forward is less use of the acceleration button, just using it more when you're out in the open and anything. So one thing I'm going to be looking for mostly is when you're running the ball through the line, is how much interaction you're going to get with the lineman. Because there are holes that you find that you think you're going to hit the hole, and the next thing you know, somebody's reaching out with a one arm, and this animation plays out where it either slows you down. But what I've seen more in the next gen version is a lot of broken tackles from one arm reach tackles while you're cutting through the line. So you can actually gain a couple more yards because you can break tackles more and keep it moving. And I like PS4 version where if you run through the line, they just automatically disengage and tackle you. So you can't really make those cuts within the line of scrimmage to make more, beneficial runs. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking for more as, we get into Madden 22 here. But they're going to continue talking more about gameplay.
It was resetting expectations over the course of Gen 3 and Gen 4. Every time there was a responsiveness issue that we were trying to address, usually what we would do is just like speed something up, scale the animation, make it move faster, make it more twitchy. And over time, it created some really unrealistic expectations in our football sim. For example, one of the more frustrating things for a number of our players was a user defender on defense could grab a middle linebacker with average speed and cover 3 or 4 routes in the middle of the field because he could accelerate through his turns and kind of run all over the field. And that became an expectation of Madden that when we watched it on streams or played it ourselves, it wasn't authentic. And so that's just one of the more glaring examples of why next-gen player movement we think is going to provide a more realistic experience. And while you could call it slowed down, I prefer to think of it as more authentic.
Yeah, from that last statement, though, backing it back to what I said in the beginning of the video about, we used to have super linebackers, now we have super safeties, just roaming down the middle of the field, playing mad defense, setting your safeties to the clouds, to the sidelines, and just roaming down the middle of the field, like with a 40-yard radius, just picking up every single route, covering 6 routes with one defender. I'm so glad that this is being toned down. You see it less and less on next gen, but every time I watch PS4 footage, that's what I'm seeing people do on defense with their user. It's just hard man defense, and everybody just taking the safety and running around the middle of the field like a madman. So with this type of movements for next gen, it's like, I think to me, if the only way they could really make it really, really better, in my opinion, is you need to also incorporate genuine pass rush. Just bring back a suitable, not glitchy, just a genuine pass rush into the game, because then you're allowed to play a standard defense with your user. You can play your assignment correctly and set your defense running, and it all works and it fits together. So with pass rush, I think it just all makes it better. But let's continue. Let's see what he has to say next.
One of the side effects that's interesting to me that I've seen people talking about is it brings defensive strategy back into it a little bit, because you can't just cover up bad strategy with a super linebacker being everywhere at once. I mean, we still want skilled on the sticks to be important for that player, and I think it's there. It's just it doesn't like the balance is shifted. It's not just so much based on what that linebacker can do. It moves a little bit back towards play calling and adjustments and covering it up. So I think that takes us back in the right direction towards authenticity there. But it's never going to not be important to be great on your user and secure the tackle or to jump to the right spot in coverage or whatever.
All right, in this next section right here, they're going to talk about the Gunslinger ability. And if you guys know my troubles online, playing with the Bears, I run into a lot of Bucks, Chiefs, and Packers gameplay. You got to deal with Aaron Rodgers and the Gunslinger. So in this next section right here, they're going to really talk about Gunslinger, what their plans are for Gunslinger in the future. And, we'll see what happens. But I just think a lot of the issues that we see in Madden right now, it's all MUT related. It's people coming from MUT. That you have your super teams, and then you bring those abilities. If you make these abilities as powerful as you make them, there's going to be drawbacks. So let's see what they have to say about Gunslinger here.
There was plenty of feedback right around Gunslinger and quarterback releases. Why don't you talk about that area where what changes we made, or what feedback we got?
I mean, I was enjoying listening to the soothing sounds of Clint's voice, but I'm happy to enlighten some people on the Gunslinger debate. I mean, we definitely heard the feedback around Gunslinger. Like, it is a strong ability. It's very powerful. For those who don't know what it does, it slightly increases the animation speed of your passes. So you'll release the ball a little bit earlier. And it also increases the velocity of the ball. once you release it. So this allows players to kind of make some plays and hit some windows that they wouldn't maybe otherwise be able to the point where some people feel like they kind of need to have the ability to execute their strategy. And we don't love any ability feeling mandatory on the ability design side. So we might investigate some ways to kind of, I don't want to say nerf, but like change the way that Gunslinger works so that you don't feel compelled to take it. And back to what Clint was talking about with realism, like we have QBs who, have very different release timings, right?
Yep.
They throw the ball faster or slower than others, much like the real humans in the NFL throw the ball slower or faster than one another. So this is by design. We want quarterbacks to feel different based on their stats. Now, the aspects of Gunslinger are that it can be a Band-Aid. It can improve a somewhat slow quarterback's release timings to something much better, easier to play with. It feels better. Maybe you avoid sacks, maybe you hit windows that you couldn't hit before. So we're looking at options. We're trying to see, maybe we tie some of that velocity into the throw power rating and take it away from Gunslinger. Maybe we look at some of the other issues around not throwing quite as fast and missing those windows. But we hear you. We're looking at options. We're not really ready to commit to any sort of plan or anything yet, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I want to dogpile here what Nick's saying about Gunslinger. We have heard the feedback from players, especially the competitive players who want to see more variety in the teams chosen and the players used for competitive events. We are still formulating a plan of attack so that there likely won't be much of a change at launch outside of we are going to distribute the Gunslinger ability to more quarterbacks. Outside of that, it'll be later in a title update when we release some more info about Gunslinger and throw releases.
For the most part, they're kind of covering a lot of my pain points for Madden 21. I'm speaking specifically of next gen, and that's a headache. I mean, I don't have Gunslinger ability. I've never used Gunslinger ability, but I didn't really realize how effective it was in terms of like it also not only quick releases, but it also affects your throw velocity, so you can get the ball to your receivers faster. And I didn't know that's what I was dealing with. I just know all I dealt with was people using the same team, always want to use the Green Bay Packers. And I know I can beat I beat the Green Bay Packers multiple times, but you can see that there are these advantages that you get when these abilities are played in. And if they're as overpowered as it was for Madden 21, then you see why people navigate or gravitate towards using the Green Bay Packers all the time, because Aaron Rodgers is really the only one with that ability. Like me personally, I really don't mind when people use the power teams, the Chiefs. I don't mind it. The only thing I don't like about it is if the game is if it's really just based off of the abilities and you're not really giving me the mechanics to solve the problem, then yeah, that's when everything starts looking like it's either too overpowerful or it starts to feel like it's glitchy. I think in my screens, you guys always hear me say, because I'm playing with the Chicago Bears, I'm not going to win the 50-50s. And the 50-50 is part of these mechanics that they put into the game. And the more of it you have on your team, the better chances you have of winning 50-50 chances when the game is close. And it really can be a pain. And dealing with, Brady doesn't have that ability, but the other abilities that Brady has also, like you can see people forcing throws into coverage. I'm like, you throwing the ball into two coverage guys, and my defenders don't pick the ball off. But I know if I was playing with Trubisky and I throw the ball into two defenders, it's going to automatically get picked off. Those little things like that. It's like they make the same mistakes I make, like penalize them for it. They can have the abilities and whatever, but it's like those 50-50 chances, you got to make that even. Like, you got to make that fair across the board, even for the weak quarterbacks. As long as the user's controlling the quarterback, there are just certain things that just has to be level. They have the abilities to play where they need to play, but if they make mistakes, allow them to pay for the same mistakes. It doesn't matter if you're using Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Trubisky. Like, my interception threshold shouldn't be higher because I'm throwing Trubisky. And I've seen that all the time. I play against people that are using Tom Brady, and they'll literally force the ball right into three defenders, and it doesn't get picked up. It just gets bounced all over the place and drops. But let's go into the next topic here. They're going to start talking about catching. and thresholds, and let's see what the info is provided.
Catching, Clint, I know that it wasn't necessarily complete in the playtest, so what do you have on the changes to catching for Madden 22?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about catching in this podcast because I think there's some important things for our players to know. But like you said, it's one of the, if not the most critical system in our game, catching. And outside of player movement, one of the other really voted upon pieces of feedback from the playtest, over 500 votes on all things catching. The top pieces of feedback were receivers and DBs need more aggressiveness in attacking the ball. Defenders don't always go for the interception or play the right animation when in position. And catch mechanics don't always feel as responsive as we would expect. Those are kind of the top three that bubble to the top through that feedback. And now I want to be really clear with our players. Catching certainly was not in a beta state during the playtest. It was pretty early. We knew that there were a number of issues in it, but what we wanted to get feedback on was our shift away from multiplayer catches. When I talk about multiplayer catches, I'm talking about those scenarios where both the defender and the offensive guy enter into an interaction, and then, for lack of a better word, you kind of watch that play out until the branch point at which one or both players get control back. We have decreased the frequency of those interactions happening in our game and are leaning more on what we call single-player catches, where both the defender and the receiver are independent. They're not entering an interaction together, and then they are basically either going to play the receiver, play the ball if you're on defense, go up and try to catch the ball independent of each other, and then at which point we can play things like catch tackles, which is a different version of a multiplayer interaction, but it's later, it's after the catch. And the feedback on that was pretty positive. But the thing that I want to tell our players the most is where we are on our journey with our catching tech. We have to make some choices here, and I wish we didn't have to make the choice, but multiplayer catches visually is going to look a lot better, but not be as responsive and leave the player in control as much as they want. That's where we were the last several years. We aimed for more control across the field this year, and that's why we strategically decided to go back to more single-player catches. With that comes some visual inaccuracies. It's not always going to look as good as a multiplayer catch, but it will leave you feeling like you're in control of the outcome in every one of those situations. I want to be really clear on that just to set proper expectations for our players. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of work that has been done for launch that's going to improve aggressiveness at the catch point for both offense and defense. And we did some work around catch heights to make the max height that a receiver or defender could jump to match a catch more appropriate to their ratings and their height. And then lastly, the other change that we want to make sure players are aware of is the SWAT thresholds have been increased. So now swatting the ball as a defensive player is going to be more effective and more conservative than always playing the ball. Since we are doing single player catches, if you go for the interception every time on defense, you do have a higher chance to just miss the ball because you're not going to be able to match that multiplayer interaction. But if you swat, the range of the swats have been increased, so you'd be more likely to knock the ball down.
So as it relates to catching that he was just talking about, one of those key points that, he was making here is how sometimes you run either an in route from your tight end or a drag route from your tight end. And you can see the linebacker or whoever the defender is maybe like a step or two behind your receiver. You throw the ball on that drag or that in, and for some reason the animation plays out where it's like you're never knocking the ball down. So what you're saying with the two-man animation or whatever, two-man catch animation is like, you're going to see less of it now. So if you have a step on your guy, then you should be able to at least make the catch. He can still tackle you, but at least that animation is not going to play out anymore where this guy just flies in front of him and knocks the ball down. So that's a good thing. I mean, they're addressing a lot of my key pain points from streaming and just playing Madden online. And a lot of stuff's not really going to show its head of what this new game is till you actually play online and see how everything plays out. And also, one of the things I haven't heard yet, and they talked about route running earlier, like, are the outside receivers going to be able to run out routes correctly? Well, not correctly, but you give them enough space to run an out route. Because the way it is right now, since they round all their routes, they can't round that out and run an out route. And if they're being bumped, at least the receivers on my team, when they get bumped, they forget their routes. I haven't heard anybody mention this yet. And I've been complaining about this since Next Gen Madden dropped for the PS5. if your receivers get bumped, if I want to run a comeback and I'm being bumped to man to man, they literally will run the comeback, turn around, and shoot back upfield again. They'll forget their routes. If you're running an out route, they forget to run the out route. They'll run back in. If you're running a whip route, they'll whip inside and whip back outside. So it's a lot of things that I haven't heard yet as it relates to that type of route running. But when the game comes up, man, we'll play it and we'll compare some of my pain points from from the last game, Madden 21 on next gen, and what's going on Madden 22. And as usual, I'll give you my feedback of what I see and what I do notice. But it's nice to know that within the catching ability, so if you're running those drag and in routes, the defenders don't play yet. You can actually make those catches, either gain a yard or gain two, but at least you're making those catches now, as opposed to like the animation play now, where the two-man animation play now, where the ball gets knocked out. So that's a good thing. So my pain points is what I mentioned earlier about route running and also pass rush. I really haven't heard much about pass rush. But those are the two things that I'm still waiting to see how that plays out, Man 22, because they're big. They're big. So let's continue.
It's the eternal struggle for creating sports games of trying to hit like the best visual fidelity and like crispest looking animations that you can, while also having it control as fluidly as possible. And those two things are usually at complete odds with one another, right? Like the better it looks, often the worse it feels, and vice versa. The full human joystick treatment where I touch the stick and the guy moves on the same frame doesn't look human at all. It's not believable. There's clipping and stuff, but it feels great. So
yeah,
a lot of the times we're kind of just like waiting on new technology, new developments that can help fix that. Like, the stuff we use for next gen player movement is an example of that. It helps us better tune that slider between like feeling good and looking good. But yeah, it's a struggle. And I think that we're definitely improving year over year, but it's kind of a decision we have to make when we're dealing with any feature, right? This might look amazing, but doesn't feel good. We can't really drop it in.
Even for authenticity features, there's that line that you have to walk between something that is truly authentic and something that's entertaining and exciting to engage with as a gamer, right? Like there's anytime authenticity is something that you're kind of chasing, there's a line between what is truly authentic and what is authentic in a fun way for people to engage with. So
yeah, I live on that line.
We all do. Really, that's the big challenge. And how do you bring authenticity as the best value add that it can be? And it should always feel authentic, but how much control and how much fun do you have to fight back into it if authenticity would pull you away?
Yeah, in a perfect world, we'd want to do both. We'd want to do all of them and do them well, and especially in a sports game, right? Like, what makes it really hard is these awesome NFL athletes every weekend are doing something new that we've never seen, and people are sending us videos saying, "Why don't you have this in our game?" And we're sitting here saying, "We would love to put that in our game. We got to figure out how."
Yeah,
this has never been done before until this very moment in time. Right. Yes, we do not have that yet.
We didn't know humans could do that.
Yeah, the OBJ catch from a few years ago, right? Like what just happened? So okay, we got to figure out how to get that in the game now. So, and maybe we went a little too far with it's in the game. And it's in the game a lot.
Yep.
I mean, they're right in a sense. It's a fine line trying to do authenticity and fun and balance, like in the game. Because I swear a lot of people would say, I want sim, I want sim, I want sim, I want sim. And then the minute you give them sim, it's like it's an uproar. Like in the beginning of the video, they talked about player movements, right? How it's slowed down, it's more realistic, it's more with what next gen stats is saying that the NFL provides. And everybody's losing their mind because they think they're losing their ability to roam the center of the field now with their user. So it's panic time for everybody. It's the same arguments about I want sim, I want sim, I want sim, I want sim. You give them sim, they panic. And the same people that will claim they want sim, if you watch their gameplay, they're not playing sim. They're playing with all the meta, which what's meta stat for? and most effective tactic available, right? That's what they're using game in, game out. It's 3 or 4 plays, same man defense all year. I mean, you guys watch the stream, you see it, right? But it'd be the same guy that'd be like, "Oh, I want sim. This isn't sim enough. This isn't this. This isn't that." But it's like, are you playing sim? Like literally, are you playing sim or are you playing the meta? Like, which one is it? Which one do you want? So if as a developer, I can see where he's coming from and say, yeah, it's a fine balance to try to make the game fun, balanced and also fair, which is a hard thing to do. I mean, you can't really challenge that argument, from a game design standpoint. That's just hard to do in general. You got to be able to please like everybody's play style. I don't fault people for wanting to play the meta style, but I'm just saying you can't be at the same leg, play that way, and then complaining about you want sim when you don't even play sim. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes zero sense to me at all. I don't get that argument. And there was an argument that I think I had like yesterday, and they were talking about custom playbooks. And you guys know my stance on custom playbooks. I'm for custom playbooks in regs because I only play with the Bears. I don't play with any other team besides the Bears. And depending on how good the Bears are that year, that's what I'm getting. So I need every advantage I can get to be able to play my opponent that's playing with the Packers, playing with Tom Brady that has all these abilities and all this rock. I don't have all this routes with Trubisky. If you're bumping me and I don't have a play in the Bears playbook to counter somebody that's going to bump me the whole entire game, say the Bears playbook has this is spread offense and you're going to bump me all game. How am I going to get out of playing into my concepts if I can't even get out of my spread offense? It's like it's just a limitation that it lives you in, and people don't want to see it that way. They just think like, they have their ways about custom playbooks, and I'm for custom playbooks. It's a good segue too into custom playbooks because that's the next section they're going to talk into next. They're going to talk about the live playbooks and just playbook enhancement in general and what they're bringing into Madden 22 in terms of like future updates. And I think during the beta they said they added about 300 new plays into playbooks for the beta. But whenever we do get the game, we're going to be able to see what your team's new playbooks look like, or what new play has been added in there, and just how the game plays in general, what works, what doesn't work, and go from there. But back to my argument about custom playbooks. Just one more thing about custom playbooks with regs. Like, if you have a money game, that's something completely different because you have to set rules, like what teams you can use, what teams you can't use, and if you don't want like custom playbooks within that, then that's fine. But I guess one thing I'll just put out there in terms of like a question is with custom playbooks, because the argument that I heard was if people have custom playbooks, then they're only going to pick like 3 or 4 of the money plays and put it in the custom playbook and use that all game. Then I'm thinking to myself, all right, I've watched people play games right now. They're not using custom playbooks, but they're not exploring the whole entire playbook. So it's like that argument in itself is kind of stupid because then you have like, okay, I'm going to pick San Francisco playbook. Are they running the entire playbook, or are they just running 3 or 4 plays within that playbook that's strong enough? That's what people do anyways. So it's like the whole argument about, if you have a custom playbook, you can only... Like, no, it's BS. It's just a way for them to glitch out the game like they always do. Because the same people that make those arguments aren't running sim. They're not playing sim style. They're all playing meta. So it doesn't really matter. All right, man, let's go into the the playbook section.
Gotcha. I think we have one more topic that I'm curious about. Clint, how do you think playbooks are coming together, with what you see in the community playtest or where we want to take it as we go into full launch?
Yeah, Tom, always bringing the heat as a man of the people. I know our players care a lot about playbooks, so thanks for
they do.
As we saw, there was 2 builds of the playtest. We had the week 1 build and the week 2 build. And the week 1 build, it was feedback around our playbooks being changed. There's not really a bunch here. We knew that playbooks weren't done yet. By week 2, playbooks got a pretty significant upgrade in the playtest, and that was maybe about 50 to 60% of what we're going to have to offer at launch. All 32 NFL team playbooks, both offensive and defensively, have been upgraded and updated for launch. And then what we're most excited about, and I know a lot of the folks who were looking forward to live playbooks last year, we do have an aggressive title update plan to get a lot more playbook content in for every one of our title updates. And we're going to have a lot more to share on the details there in an upcoming Gridiron Notes here in a few weeks that are going to detail out all of the new stuff in playbooks.
That's fantastic. I know that, talking about the authenticity versus the fun thing, playbooks are literally the authenticity side of things, right? Where we're taking plays that we see on the field on Sundays and incorporating those into the playbooks frequently. So I'm sure plenty of people are going to be very excited to hear about those live updates, especially for teams with new coordinators or coaches, right? I mean, you can get the wrinkles in general, but when you have a guy who's never called plays before now in charge of that, there's definitely going to be some differences between what they run week 1 and what they run week 6.
Yeah, that's always a big focus of A-dubs. Everyone knows Anthony White. He's our playbook guru here. The first thing we always do is look at the coaching changes, and what he does immediately is go watch his film of their previous stop to kind of line out their base playbook. And then once the season starts, we'll continue updating their new schemes via live playbooks. But we really made an effort this year to talk with players, talk with community members about what they want in playbooks. And we've been very aggressive at bringing not only real stuff, but fun stuff and more variety across all of our playbooks. And we're really excited to see what players are going to think once they get their hands on it come August 20th.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks, Matt. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about on the gameplay front in terms of the community playtest or coming up into the launch window?
I think there's just one small detail I'd cover, and I'll do it very quickly. I know I've talked way too much today, but it comes up, every year about this time, people ask about D-line stunts and twists. They want stunts and twists in the game. I want stunts and twists in the game. They're a big part of strategy in the real world NFL. They're not going to make an appearance in 22. They're still on our radar, on our roadmap. We want to do it, but we want to do it right. If we wanted to bring in stunts and twists as purely visual and just tell one guy to run one way and another guy to loop around and go the other way with no impact to the game, we could probably do that, but it would be a very superficial feature. And to do it the right way, it touches a number of things. It touches run blocking AI, pass blocking AI, obviously run fits and defensive gaps. There's a ton of new animation coverage that you need. Then you have to balance it. Then you have to figure out what to do with pre-play mechanics. There's all these different systems that go into making stunts and twists. And I just want to acknowledge the feedback from our players. We know it's important to you. It's important to us. We want to be able to deliver it when we know we can deliver a full user-facing feature that surprises and delights and meets expectations. And that's just not, based on our timelines, that's just not going to be a thing this year. But it did come up a lot in the playtest feedback, so I wanted to make sure to address that.
All right, guys, that's it, man. That's all of the talking points for the Making Madden podcast. Those are just my thoughts on the game, but I say it's wrapping to an end. So if you're new to my channel, man, hit that subscribe button for me one time. Bang. And as usual, fellas, I'll holler at you dudes later. All right, one.